Is Alexander Volkanovski still the greatest featherweight in the world, or is Illia Topuria going to prove that it's his time and back up all the trash talk that he's been saying leading up to this fight? I'm going to look to answer those questions here today because I'm going to break down the entire UFC 298 card from top to bottom. I'm going to give you my picks, breakdown, and analysis on every single fight on this card. And I'm also going to give you something different to think about as you're building your parlays, as you're getting your bets together. I'm going to talk about things like mindset and mentality and how that could potentially play a factor in the outcome of some of these matchups. But before we get into that, if you're new here, go ahead and smash that subscribe button, give this video a thumbs up, and ring that notification bell because you don't want to miss out on the journey that I'm about to take you on here on ChampMind Studios in the foreseeable future. But with that being said, guys, let's go ahead and break this card down. I'm going to do things a little bit different this time. I'm going to start with the main event. Let's give you the bottom line up front, right? For my military folks out there, you know what I mean by that. But listen, man, I've been pretty vocal about how I think Illia Topuria is setting himself up for a humbling experience Saturday night. I think he's setting himself up for a huge failure because all this talk, all this, listen, he's putting on his Instagram page like he's already the champion. He's walking around with a fake title. I mean, give me a break, I'm big on manifestation. I'm big on speaking things into existence, right? And triggering your subconscious mind to get that, that thought process going of attacking your goals, right? Seeing it, believing it, all that stuff, right? But listen, you haven't done anything yet. You haven't won the title yet. And you have in front of you one of the greatest fighters of our generation, one of the most dominant champions in the last decade, in Alexander Volkanovski, and you're taking him way too lightly. Topuria has said in these interviews that he thinks Volkanovski is going to be his easiest fight yet, and that just makes no sense. I mean, look, again, I'm big on confidence. You have to have confidence as an elite level athlete, elite level fighter. You don't believe in yourself, you're done. So I can appreciate that, but there's a difference between confidence and arrogance. And in my opinion, Illia Topuria is exhibiting some of the signs of arrogance, which is he is saying all of these things because he's trying to convince himself. He's trying to convince himself because he doesn't actually believe it. And look, man, I might be totally way off base. I might be way wrong on this. He might go in there Saturday and absolutely back up everything he's been saying and starch Volkanovski and knock him out in the first round. Conor McGregor did it against Jose Aldo, and all those years ago, I was saying that Aldo was going to humble this kid, was going to give him a wake-up call. So maybe Topuria gets it done. He's a fantastic fighter. I'll give him that. I'm a huge fan of Illia Topuria, even though it may sound like I'm not. I think this guy has tremendous potential, and he will be a champion. He will be a champion before his career is over. Now, whether that happens Saturday night, I'm not sold on that. I'm not sold on it. I think, look, let's talk about how Topuria matches up with Volk, right? He's got tremendous boxing. He has some of the best boxing in that featherweight division. I mean, the way he rips to the body and then goes to the head, he's got some phenomenal hands and tremendous speed and knockout power. But what is not really often talked about with Topuria is his grappling. He's a high-level wrestler. Very high-level wrestler. Very, very good on the ground. He's a phenomenal fighter. I mean, he really is. And if you were going to ask me, what is the best style? If you were gonna create a fighter in the featherweight division that would have the best chance at beating Alexander Volkanovski, 100% it would be Illia Topuria. He's got it all. He's got every physical skill that you can ask for in a fighter. So why am I not convinced that he's going to get it done Saturday night? Because Alexander Volkanovski is not your average aging champion. Everybody wants to point to the age. Everybody wants to say he's getting old. He's getting old. And yeah, he is. He doesn't look it, though. Everybody's pointing to that Islam Makhachev fight and saying, oh, we just saw Volk get knocked out. That's proof that he's done. Like, are you out of your mind? He took this fight on like 5 days' notice, barely trained, and yeah, he got knocked out against one of the best pound-for-pound fighters in the entire world, in Islam Makhachev, in the higher weight class above him, where earlier that year he pushed Islam Makhachev to the absolute limit when he had a full training camp, then goes back down to featherweight, defends his title again, and absolutely dominates Yair Rodriguez, the very same Yair Rodriguez who, by the way, everybody was saying the same thing that they're saying about Topuria. They were saying about Yair Rodriguez in the sense that, oh, he's such a dynamic striker. He's so good. He's going to knock Volkanovski out. Volk's done. Volk is getting old. Volk went out there and absolutely dominated Yair Rodriguez. So this is a really intriguing fight for me because there's a lot to unpack from a mindset perspective, and that's what this channel is all about, right? But let's first, before we get into the mindset, let's talk about the technique side. Let's do a technical breakdown, how these fighters match up together. I talked about Topuria. I said he's got phenomenal boxing, very high-level wrestling, very, very good grappling, good killer instinct, right? Volkanovski is great everywhere, right? This guy also has very, very good boxing, but he also has some thunderous leg kicks. And this is something, Topuria doesn't throw a lot of kicks. He's more of a boxer. He relies on his hands. Volk mixes it up more. In my opinion, I think Alexander Volkanovski is the more dynamic striker of the two. And yes, obviously, the longer this fight stays standing, Illia Topuria is extremely dangerous, and he is very, very live for a knockout, but so is Volk. We forget Volkanovski has tremendous power in his striking as well. So I definitely don't think Topuria is just going to go in there and absolutely, dominate Volk in the stand-up. I think the exchanges are going to be close, and I think both fighters are going to have their moments there. We're going to see a lot of grappling here as well. And I mentioned Topuria, very high-level wrestler, very good grappler. So is Volk. Volk has really good wrestling, very, very strong in the clinch. And we saw, the Yair Rodriguez fight, perfect example. He took him down at will and just totally dismantled Yair Rodriguez on the ground. I don't think he's necessarily going to be able to do that against Topuria. But I think he's going to have success in the clinch, pushing Topuria up against the fence, especially as we get into these championship rounds. And this is where I think Volkanovski is going to start turning the tables because his conditioning is top of the food chain. He has some of the best cardio in the entire game. And that's just a matter of having, multiple 5-round championship fights. He's built for it. This is Topuria's, I think it's going to be his second ever 5-round fight. His first one was against Josh Emmett, which he looked great. Totally destroyed Josh Emmett. But I do think conditioning will be a concern. If Topuria can't put Volkanovski away early, we're going to see a similar outcome to the fight we saw last weekend between Joe Pyfer and Jack Hermansson, where Pyfer in that first 2 rounds, looked very good, was doing very, very well with his boxing, was landing some pretty good shots, but for the most part, Hermansson was blocking a lot of them and was kind of weathering that early storm, and then he started, pouring it on and turning the tables at the end of the second round and throughout the rest of the fight going into the third, fourth, and fifth round. I see that happening here. I see Topuria winning the first round, winning the second round, and then Volk just pouring it on in the championship rounds. I also think Volk is going to have the edge mentally. And I mentioned, I think Topuria is just, he's very arrogant leading up to this fight. And I think that's going to be his undoing. I really do. He's expecting to take Volkanovski out early. He's expecting an easy fight. And if he doesn't get that, I think the very second that he realizes he's not going to be able to put Volk away early, his mentality, his confidence is going to be totally shattered. Whereas you have on the other side Volkanovski, who is absolutely determined and driven to humble this kid, to remind the world that this is his division, this is his weight class, this is his kingdom, and he's not going anywhere anytime soon. He's going to put to rest all this Volka's old talk, and he's going to go after Illia Topuria and look to make a statement. I think that's going to set him apart, and that is why my prediction here is going to be Alexander Volkanovski, and I'm going to take him by unanimous decision. I do think Topuria will go the distance with him. I do think Topuria will have his moments, and it may even be a very, very close fight on the judges' scorecards, but I am going to go with Volkanovski to retain his title and go on to continue reigning over that featherweight division. But I do think Illia Topuria will be the featherweight champion one day soon. I just don't think it's going to happen Saturday night. All right, moving on to the co-main event. We've got top middleweights going at it between former middleweight champ Bobby Knuckles, Robert Whittaker, going up against Paulo Costa. And this is a very exciting matchup, if it even happens. I mean, listen, I'm always a little bit cautious when it comes to Paulo Costa, because this guy, he barely fights. And then whenever he's scheduled to fight, it just feels like he backs out last minute, or he gets injured, or something happens. So I'm hopefully I didn't just jinx it, because I really do hope this fight happens, because it's a very, very intriguing stylistic matchup, and I think an important one for the middleweight division. I love Robert Whittaker. I think Robert Whittaker is, I mean, you can't say enough good things about what he does in there. Fantastic striker. His footwork, his movement, his just basic understanding of angles, and just the way that he picks fighters apart. I mean, it's brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. He's also very, very good on the ground too. Just doesn't show it a lot. But man, this guy is still one of the best fighters in the world. People forget this. People forget this because he just got knocked out by Dricus Du Plessis, who, by the way, is the middleweight champion now. So I don't think there's a ton of shame in that, right? But people forget how good Whittaker is. The odds makers aren't, because they have him as a pretty moderate favorite here at like minus, I think, 225 or 250 against Paulo Costa. And then you got Paulo Costa, who is, I mean, he's an absolute, he's a juggernaut, man. I mean, there's no other way to describe him. Extremely powerful, very, very good striker with heavy hands, heavy kicks, heavy knees and elbows. Also very strong with his wrestling, very strong when in that top position. But he doesn't, like I said, he doesn't fight enough. He's very inactive. Last time we saw him was against Luke Rockhold about 2 years ago. He was supposed to fight Khamzat Chimaev, and then, unfortunately, had to pull out due to I think he had like an infection or something like that. But in any case, I've heard people talk about this fight and say that it is, power versus technique. And I don't necessarily agree with that, because Paulo Costa is a lot more technical than he appears, and Robert Whittaker is a lot more powerful than he looks too. So there's a lot more to it. I think it's going to come down to a couple things here. And one of them is, you guessed it, mindset. Robert Whittaker, for example, he just got knocked out by Dricus Du Plessis, right? Knocked out by the current champion. So what's his mentality like? Obviously, he wants to look to get himself back into that number one contender status and get an opportunity to get his belt back, right? But he also doesn't have a lot of time on his side. He's getting a little bit older in age. Doesn't necessarily look like it, though. He still looks really good. Again, we're recency bias aside, he's still Robert Whittaker, and outside of that Dricus Du Plessis knockout, he was still beating the top contenders in the division and doing it with a relative amount of ease. So we can't forget that. But then we got to think, he's going up against Paulo Costa, who's, I mentioned, very, very powerful. So when you get knocked out, I mean, it plays with your mind a lot. And is he going to come in gun shy? Is he going to be afraid to, test the waters with Paulo Costa in fear of getting clipped and getting knocked out? Is he going to try to play it safe and, dance around, use his footwork a lot, which I expect him to do? But, is that going to cost him when it comes to, the way judges score fights now, which is going to be based off of damage? So that's something to think about. Then you got to think about Paulo Costa. What's his mindset? Obviously, he just wants to go in there, remind people that he's still one of the best fighters in that division. Doesn't fight a lot, and he wants to go in there and make a statement and silence a lot of the critics because, don't forget, after he pulled out of that Khamzat Chimaev fight, Khamzat was spinning the narrative that Paulo Costa wasn't actually injured and pulled out because he was afraid of him. And Khamzat Chimaev has a big enough of a fan base to where a lot of people believe that. And a lot of people were heckling Paulo Costa and saying, calling him a pussy, saying he was scared, this, that, the other thing. So Paulo Costa, that's running through his mind, and he's obviously, wanting to silence a lot of people here. So there's a lot of things to unpack from a mindset perspective. From a technique perspective, I think Robert Whittaker is still the better fighter on paper. And ordinarily, I would pick Robert Whittaker, especially when you think about the last time we saw Whittaker fight a guy that was similar to Paulo Costa was Yoel Romero. And Yoel Romero, he put Whittaker in some danger, but Whittaker ate all those shots, marched forward, and picked Yoel Romero apart. But that was Robert Whittaker in his prime. That was prime Bobby Knuckles. And I just don't know if that guy is still there. He might be. He might go in there and absolutely take the biggest shots that Paulo Costa has and pick him apart and get a decision. We could see that, especially given the fact that Costa hasn't fought in over 2 years. So what's he going to look like? A lot of question marks there. I've been going back and forth with this one. I think I was originally leaning on Bobby Knuckles. I think I've changed the pick a little bit. I might flip back to him before the fight, before I put bets together on FanDuel. But as of right now, I'm going with the underdog. I'm going with Paulo Costa. And I think he's going to get it done by a TKO finish. If not, I do think he even can win by decision just by scoring more damage, landing the more impactful shots, and getting the better of the striking exchanges. He's not going to outpoint Whittaker. I think Whittaker's going to have more volume, but I think Costa's going to have, like I said, the more impactful strikes landed. And as we've seen, that's kind of what judges look for now. So I'm going with Paulo Costa, but again, I might flip pick back and forth before they actually get in there. In any case, I just hope they get in there because I'm very excited for this matchup, and I've been wanting to see these two guys fight for a long time. So let's see how it plays out. But moving along this pay-per-view card, we've got the former Olympic gold medalist and two-division UFC champion, Henry Cejudo, the king of cringe, going up against the #1 ranked bantamweight in the world, my boy Merab Dvalishvili. Big fan of Merab, if you can't tell. I'm from Long Island, so I'm always going to be super biased to those Long Island Serra-Longo guys. But having said that, I think this is a tough fight for him, even though he is pretty moderate favorite. He's minus, I think, 205 as I'm doing this video. I don't think that is accurate. I think the odds are a little wide for this matchup because we're talking about Henry Cejudo here. We're talking about one of the greatest combat sports athletes of all time. Whether you love him or hate him, you can't deny that. And listen, look at that fight that he had with Aljamain Sterling last year. That was a very, very close fight. A lot of people thought that Cejudo did enough to win. I didn't. I scored it for Sterling. I was actually a little surprised at how Sterling was able to kind of get the better of the wrestling exchanges. That threw me off. But in any case, very, very close fight with, the then bantamweight champion. And imagine, listen, if Cejudo actually got that decision, if he won that fight, he probably would have beaten Sean O'Malley. I think he's got the style to beat O'Malley. So you're talking Cejudo might be the champion right now. Didn't happen, but in an alternate reality, it maybe could have. So he's fighting Merab, who's fresh off a very impressive performance against the former champ Petr Yan last year, where he scored the record for most takedowns attempted in a single UFC fight with, I think it was 53 takedown attempts. Absolutely insane. And that is the pace that Merab Dvalishvili brings to the table. It is absolutely unreal. People will say, oh, he's a boring fighter. He's a wet blanket. All he does is just, lay on top of guys. But you have to appreciate the conditioning and the output that this guy is able to produce each and every single time. It is absolutely insane. If you've never wrestled before, you don't understand how physically grueling and taxing it is to shoot one takedown, much less 53. So you got to give this dude some credit for that. And he's got a tremendous pace that he brings to the table. He also has very good striking as well. In fact, he earned his UFC contract way back in, I think, 2017 on Dana White's Looking for a Fight series when he knocked out former Bellator bantamweight champion Rafion Stotts with a spinning elbow. So he's got the striking. He's a volume striker, a pressure fighter that's constantly in your face from bell to bell and doesn't give his opponents any room to breathe. And that's partly why he's been as successful as he's been and, you know, floating around the upper echelon of that bantamweight division for the last couple of years. But I do think he's going to have a tough time against Henry Cejudo. Because, again, we're talking about Henry Cejudo here, one of the best wrestlers to ever step foot in a UFC octagon. The guy won the gold medal representing the United States and has been able to transition into MMA, still use that elite wrestling base, but couple it with some really good striking, tremendous knockout power. Listen, Henry Cejudo's he's got shockingly good knockout power. We've seen that before. We saw it in the TJ Dillashaw fight where he became a double champ. We saw it against Marlon Moraes. We saw it against Dominic Cruz. This guy has power in his hands and has some very underrated striking skills that's been getting better and better over the years. But he's still a very good wrestler. People will say, well, you know, Aljamain Sterling took him down. Aljo's a good wrestler, but Aljo had the size. Aljo had that size and that strength advantage that definitely, when you got two wrestlers, usually the bigger guy is going to have a little bit of an advantage, regardless of the pedigree, right? Regardless of who's the better credentialed wrestler. So I do think, even though Merab has really good wrestling and a tremendous pace, I think he's going to have a hard time getting Henry Cejudo to the ground. And I think when it comes to the stand-up, I don't know if Merab's a better striker than Henry. I don't. I mean, I think Cejudo is going to be dangerous. You know, I think both guys are going to have moments on the feet. You're going to see, I don't think Cejudo is going to shoot for many takedowns. I think Henry Cejudo is going to try to knock Merab out. And Merab is going to try to shoot takedown after takedown. And I don't think he's going to get it. So this is going to come down to who is the better striker on the feet and who is going to land the more significant, impactful shots. And I got to tell you, I as much as I said it, I'm a huge Merab Dvalishvili fan. I normally would pick him. I got a gut feeling here that Triple C is going to get it done, remind people that he's still one of the best in the world, potentially even knock Merab out. Hate saying that. Don't want to see that. Want to see Merab win. But I'm going with Henry Cejudo. I'm going with Triple C, and I think he's going to get it done. Let's call it second round TKO finish. All right, next up, we've got everybody's favorite fighter, Ian Garry. Ian Garry taking on Jeff Neal. Listen, before I break this down, I want to address something because I'm also not the biggest fan of Ian Garry's, and when all of that was coming out about, you know, his wife writing the book on how to be a wag, which is a wife and girlfriend essentially of a you know, a famous athlete, and everybody was saying, you know, Ian Garry's a cuck and all this stuff. I was right there with you until I read an interview by a former colleague of mine, E. Spencer Kite, who writes for UFC.com. I've known E. Spencer Kite for years. We used to write together on Bleacher Report way back in the day. I have a tremendous amount of respect for E. Spencer Kite. And he interviewed Ian Garry, and Ian Garry kind of set the record straight. And reading his responses, I kind of feel bad for hating on the guy. Although I'm still not the biggest fan of his. I think he's extremely cringy. I can't get behind him. But read the interview, and it might change your perspective on the whole situation. But in any case, we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about Ian Garry, the fighter. And Ian Garry, the fighter, is very damn good. Tremendous striking, very, very technical, and dangerous on the feet. And his grappling is getting better. He's training with the best jiu-jitsu guys in the world. His grappling is evolving. His entire mixed martial arts game is steadily evolving. So I think this guy is tremendous. I understand why people want to see him get knocked out, and a lot of people think Jeff Neal is going to expose him, and he might. He very well might. Jeff Neal is incredibly underrated in that welterweight division. I mean, this is a guy that is a perennial top 10, top 15 welterweight. He looked very, very good against Shavkat Rakhmonov. He had Shavkat Rakhmonov hurt in a back-and-forth slugfest on the feet before eventually getting submitted. He's beaten and fought some of the best guys in that division and has been very consistent for the past couple of years. So when you couple that with the fact that Ian Gary, as good as he is and as technically sound as he is, does tend to leave himself open at times, has been hurt, has been rocked before. I mean, Keenan Song almost knocked him out last year in a fight night card. Almost knocked Ian Gary out, and in fact probably would have if he didn't try to follow that up with taking him down to the ground. If he would have just pressed forward and kept trying to land shots, Ian Gary might have been knocked out cold. So I get it. I see where people are coming from with this. I see why people are leaning on Jeff Neal. He's got tremendous power, and he's just a very, very good fighter. But I'll be honest with you, I think Ian Gary is going to pick Jeff Neal apart. I think this kid's getting better every time we see him. He's got something to prove. He's ready to go out there and just silence all these critics, all these people that are talking shit about him, talking shit about his family, his wife. He's going to channel all of that aggression, and he's going to put it on Jeff Neal. And I think we're going to see probably one of the best performances out of Ian Gary to this date. And I know that's probably not what you wanted to hear because, listen, a lot of people hate this guy. A lot of people hate Ian Gary. But I think he's a really good fighter. And Jeff Neal is very, very good too. He's also extremely durable and extremely powerful. But I like Ian Gary in this fight. I think Ian Gary is going to get it done. I like him by unanimous decision, so give me Ian Gary by decision. All right, next up, we've got the fight that's kicking off the pay-per-view card, and that is going to be Roman Kopylov taking on Anthony Fluffy Hernandez. And this is an interesting fight. This is a very, very good fight. And I think the odds are wide in a lot of these matchups on this card, and this one as well. You got Anthony Hernandez, who's a minus, I think, 2-0. I got it right in front of me. Minus 245. So he's a pretty moderate favorite against Roman Kopylov. And I think it's a lot closer than the odds will tell you. You know, Kopylov is an extremely dangerous and devastating striker who has one-shot kill to him, whether it's going to be with his kicks or his hands. This guy has some scary knockout power and some damn good technique to go along with it. And he also has really good takedown defense. And that's why I think this fight is going to be a lot closer than the odds are telling you. Because, yes, Anthony Hernandez is a fantastic grappler. Fantastic grappler. When he gets you down to the ground, more often than not, he's going to submit you. So if he can get Roman Kopylov down to the ground, I can see that minus 245 making sense. But can he do it? That's the question. Kopylov, like I mentioned, his takedown defense is very good, and it's getting better every single time we see him. And if Anthony Hernandez can't get this fight to the ground, I think Kopylov is going to knock him out. So that's going to be my pick. I'm going with the underdog. I'm going with Kopylov. I think he's going to get it done. I think he's going to get it done early. So I'm going to say first round knockout for Roman Kopylov. All right, I'm going to go through these prelims pretty fast. But we got Amanda Lemos going up against Mackenzie Dern, and I'm taking Amanda Lemos here. I think Mackenzie Dern she's tremendous. She's got a lot of potential, but she just can't quite figure it out. She just can't quite crack into that upper echelon of her division. We saw her get exposed quite a bit against Jessica Andrade last time out. Amanda Lemos has a very similar style to Jessica Andrade, so I'm taking Amanda Lemos here. Next, we've got Marcos Rogerio de Lima going up against the heavy-handed Justin Tafa. And look, I get it. Everybody is remembering that fight with Derek Lewis and how Derek Lewis just ran forward and starched Marcos Rogerio de Lima and they're thinking that Justin Tafa, I mean, this guy's got tremendous power too, is probably going to do the same thing. But there's more to it than that. Marcos Rogerio de Lima on paper is the better skilled fighter. And while it is heavyweight, and while I could see Justin Tafa absolutely obliterating Marcos Rogerio de Lima and sending him to the Shadow Realm, I'm going to take the better skilled fighter to get this done by decision. So give me Marcos Rogerio de Lima. Next up after that, you got the biggest favorite on this card at minus 1,200 odds, which is ridiculous. Rinya Nakamura taking on Carlos Vera. Not going to spend a lot of time on this one. The odds pretty much tell you what it is. Rinya Nakamura is going to get this done, but I wouldn't touch this when it comes to betting. I mean, unless you're going to put it in some parlays, but even with that, we've seen some crazy stuff happen. We see some crazy upsets, but this one's, I think, pretty safe. Rinya Nakamura is going to get this one done. I'm going to blow through these last three prelims here pretty quick, but I got Brenson Ribeiro at plus 100 odds, getting it done against Zhang Mingyang. And then I got Danny Barlow getting it done against Josh Quinlan. And then the final fight of the prelims, I'm taking Miranda Maverick to get it done against Andrea Lee. I just think her size and wrestling advantage that she's going to have in this fight is going to carry through and earn her a pretty clear decision win to open up the night of fights for UFC 298. But guys, those are my predictions. Those are my official picks for the entire UFC 298 card. So I hope you liked this video. If you did, again, smash that subscribe button, give this video a thumbs up, and ring that notification bell. But until next time, let's unleash greatness. Boom!